marks 50,000 COVID-19 cases since the start of the pandemic.
Today, our city faces a grim reality.
It's also reporting a new daily record of COVID infections. Could more restrictions be on the way? Plus,
this funding will ensure that municipal transit remains a safe transportation option for people across our province.
from funding for transit to support for public health, the city and other hard-hit municipalities are getting a financial boost to cover pandemic shortfalls. Will it be enough? And
this seizure is the biggest single-day drug and firearm seizure in TPS history.
a Toronto man is facing dozens of charges after a massive seizure of guns and drugs by the city's police. How it was all uncovered. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. Ontario is reporting more than 2,000 cases of COVID-19 for a second day in a row, with a record 2,139 new infections today. Toronto also hit a new daily record with 850 cases. As Ali Chiasson reports, with case counts at all-time highs, there are now talks of possible further restrictions.
Today should be a jolt for all of us. Dr. Davila?
Mayor John Tory steps aside to let the city's medical officer of health give us the sobering statistics. On a day where we reached 850 new COVID-19 cases in this city.
This, again, a record high of new reported cases. There are currently 281 people in Toronto who are in hospital with COVID-19, and 68 are in the ICU. Sadly, 19 people have died.
Tragic and disappointing considering this increase in cases has occurred while the city is in lockdown.
Today, the youngest person amongst those sick enough to be in hospital is 23 years old. In the last day, a 47-year-old is the youngest amongst those reported to have died from COVID-19. The risk of even more widespread illness is real and rising.
Just how fast are case numbers rising? Take a look at this chart. Toronto has reached 50,000 cases since the beginning of the pandemic. It took over 9 months to reach the first 25,000 cases. The last 25,000 occurred between October and now. And that's only the tip of the iceberg, Davila says.
We report on cases in people who tested positive. What we don't capture are infections that aren't symptomatic or are so mildly symptomatic that people don't think that they have COVID and don't get tested. Those people are able to spread infection and never know it, possibly spreading it to someone who won't be as lucky.
28-day lockdown.
Mayor Tory says he's in talks with GTHA mayors and the Premier about further lockdown restrictions, taking advantage of already reduced hours during the holidays and making more services off limits. This happening just as Toronto was approaching the end of its 28-day lockdown coming up on Monday.
I think we need to do more and not less. I think it needs to be regional in nature so that we leave people with fewer options as to other places they might go.
More specifics are expected in the coming days. In the meantime, their plea to the public is simple. Spend the holidays only with those in your household. Dr. Eileen Davila says there is a light at the end of the tunnel here, referring to the vaccine news, but we are still very much in that tunnel. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
And an update late this afternoon on containing the spread of COVID-19 in Ontario classrooms. In a memo to school boards, the province is recommending students and staff take home any materials that they may require for remote learning, just in case a decision to switch to online learning is made during the holiday break. The education minister says while transmission of the disease in schools remains low, school boards should be prepared for all scenarios. The TDSB is urging parents to prepare for that possibility as well. And tonight, they've announced the closure of another school due to a COVID-19 outbreak. Nelson Mandela Park Public School will be closed as of tomorrow until January 4th. This after it was revealed the school board is considering sending hundreds of displaced students from another school to Nelson Mandela. As Greg Ross reports, parents at the school are pushing back.
We were called for an emergency meeting last Friday morning.
Rachel DeSea is on the executive committee for the Nelson Mandela Park Public School Parent Council. She also has 2 kids who go to the school. She says she couldn't believe her ears when she heard what the Toronto District School Board was considering.
We were told that the decision had been made to move the students from the Island Public School into our building as of January 4th through March because of the ferry challenges. It's outrageous to think that it would be a good idea to close to double the number of students within a building during the pandemic.
She says she got the news just days after Toronto Public Health declared a COVID-19 outbreak at the school. According to the TDSB, at least 6 people have tested positive, 3 students and 3 teachers.
The risk of bringing more people into that environment in a neighborhood that has the highest rate of COVID-19 in the downtown core right now is irresponsible. It's reckless.
Right now, we are still looking at the options.
This morning, the TDSB sent letters to parents asking them to take part in a virtual meeting, and they say right now nothing is set in stone.
The first option we want to be able to use is that everyone stays where they are.
But for students who attend the Toronto Island School, getting there every day has become a problem. The city only has 1 ferry in service during the winter months.
During the pandemic, the capacity of that ferry is capped at 50%, which means that all of our students can't take that same ferry across to the island, meaning that you'd have to take 2 or 3 trips over to the island, which could then delay students an hour or 2.
Nelson Mandela Park School is the emergency evacuation site for students at the Island School. They were transferred there a few years ago when the island flooded. And if the decision were made to do it again, the TDSB says safety would be a priority.
We would have them primarily on different levels of the school. You would have different schedules to make sure that the students are not coming and going at the same time. They'd have different facilities to use.
DeSea says she's already talked to a number of other parents, and they plan to fight it if the board decides to send more students to Nelson Mandela Park. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
An emergency meeting of the Ontario Hospital Association was held today as officials try to figure out how to deal with the surging number of COVID-19 patients. As Chris Glover reports, the spike is beginning to have an impact on general patient care.
Collingwood's Janet Carlisle was diagnosed with a malignant tumor in her leg in September.
It's rare and treatable, but it can only be, there's 3 hospitals in Canada that treat this.
Originally, she thought surgery to remove it would be before the holidays. Yesterday, she found out she now has to wait till at least the first week of January.
It's stressful. So waiting and anticipating, it's very much a mind game.
I know, it's okay. I'll just stay calm.
Yesterday, CBC broke the news that Ontario Health has put every hospital in the province on notice to prepare emergency plans. In COVID hot zones, that means clearing up to 15% of beds for COVID patients.
It's a serious thing.
Family physician Dr. Nadia Alam knows canceling or postponing elective surgeries for patients can be problematic.
Impacts thousands of patients across Ontario. So it's actually a really big deal for them to say, we need you to look at ways of decreasing the amount of services you're providing by 15% to free up those beds.
As if yesterday's warning to hospitals wasn't dire enough, again today an increase of COVID patients in hospital, up to 932 now with 256 in intensive care, dangerously close to the peak of Ontario's first wave. To plan a coordinated operation today, an emergency meeting for the Ontario Hospital Association. In a statement, the association feared a post-holiday surge of COVID will almost most certainly disrupt other acute care services.
I'm still optimistic that we can stop short of that catastrophic scenario.
Now immune compromised herself, living in her all year round resort town of Collingwood, Janet Carlisle prays people stay home during the holidays, especially after seeing Toronto hospital staff yesterday.
These folks are stressed beyond, I've never seen such a thing.
Stay home if not for yourself, Carlisle says. Do it for the healthcare pros who are running off their feet. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
At Brampton Civic Hospital, there are now 80 patients with COVID-19. 16 of them are in the ICU. That number is double what the hospital was seeing at the beginning of December. But there is some good news for the city. The mayor of Brampton says he expects vaccinations to arrive next week.
I spoke to the Premier directly that there'll be special attention paid to the areas that are currently under lockdown, like Brampton. And so I'm looking forward to those first vaccines being administered next week at Brampton Civic.
Remember that a vaccine does you no good if you haven't had it yet. And it is not the solution alone. If this was an ice storm, if this was a hurricane, you wouldn't be out and about in the community trying to have social gatherings or head to a restaurant in another town.
Dr. Lowe adds that although the lockdown has plateaued the spread of the virus, the risk is still high. The test positivity rate is at about 11%, down from 14%. Now, another city in Peel is facing similar hospital numbers. Mississauga's Trillium Health Partners are dealing with 90 COVID-19 related hospitalizations. 25 of those are in the ICU. Mayor Bonnie Crombie says looking at those high numbers, she isn't hopeful restrictions will be lifted anytime soon.
I know many people have been holding out hope that we will be moved out of lockdown before the holiday season. And while the province has not yet announced their decision, we are anticipating that Peel, Mississauga, will remain in the gray lockdown zone over the holidays.
Peel region is averaging 448 daily COVID-19 cases this week, with Mississauga responsible for 164 of them. And Toronto is getting an additional $1.2 billion to help cover its pandemic shortfalls. Provincial and federal officials revealed the funding today, aimed at keeping Ontario municipalities afloat. Taylor Simmons has more on the announcement and whether it will be enough.
One of Toronto's biggest budget shortfalls this year, hundreds of millions in revenue from the TTC.
But we still had the cost of operating almost the full system. To get people where they had to go, especially our frontline workers.
This announcement tossing the system a lifeline. According to the city, just under $800 million is set aside for the TTC as part of a $1.3 billion provincial transit fund.
This funding will ensure that municipal transit remains a safe transportation option for people across our province.
In all, the province announced nearly $2 billion, the second cash influx from a joint federal-provincial fund. It's meant to help struggling municipalities balance this year's budget.
They make expenditures on public health and social services. They have to improve their IT systems for staff, provide personal protective equipment, find housing for the homeless population. So their expenditures went up, but at the same time, their revenues went down.
About $400 million will go to the budgets of the hardest hit municipalities like Toronto, Mississauga, and Brampton. The remaining $300 million to the rest of the province.
And if cities don't have the support they need from provincial and federal governments, what COVID hasn't claimed, a rapid tax increase because of budget shortfalls will.
We will be able to continue, most importantly, with vital services, but we'll be able to do so without incurring a deficit.
The city says the funds will help other heavily impacted divisions like shelters, public health, and long-term care. But with the pandemic far from over, experts warn more money will likely be needed.
Are people going to get back on the transit system? How quickly is that going to happen? Are other user fee revenues going to increase? What's going to happen to the property tax base? So there are still challenges facing municipalities in 2021.
The Ontario government says conversations are ongoing about their next ask to Ottawa. Taylor Simmons, CBC News, Toronto.
In an effort to increase Toronto's housing supply, City Council has voted in favor of implementing a vacant home tax. Council voted 24-1 to move forward with designating a tax to take effect in 2022. It's meant to encourage homeowners to sell or rent their unoccupied homes. If they do choose to keep it vacant, a tax would be levied. The city says that revenue can be used to fund affordable housing projects. Toronto's tax rate will be determined in the tax development process. Determining how a home is deemed vacant will also be a part of the process. City staff will report back to Council later next year. The SIU is investigating after the driver of an alleged stolen vehicle suffered life-threatening injuries in a police pursuit in Brampton. Shortly after midnight, Peel Police received a call that a driver of a white work van was speeding and driving erratically.
Officers were able to locate this vehicle, and subsequently there was contact between a Peel Regional Police cruiser and this van in the area of Church and Kennedy, where we have a secondary scene.
The 33-year-old driver didn't stop, instead making his way to Kennedy and Williams Parkway, where this vehicle hit a second cruiser, mounted the grass, and struck a cement barrier. Firefighters were called in to extract the man from the car. He was then airlifted to hospital in critical condition. Ontario's police watchdog is now looking for video and witnesses. Toronto police say they've made a record seizure of guns and drugs.
This seizure is the biggest single-day drug and firearm seizure in TPS history.
Investigators say it all stems from a raid on an apartment in the Park Lawn and Queensway area last month. Officers seized $18 million worth of illegal drugs, including cocaine, crystal meth, and fentanyl. They also found 65 firearms, along with thousands of rounds of ammunition. Police believe the weapons were meant for street gangs. 45-year-old Daniel Dubaich of Toronto is facing a long list of drug trafficking and firearms charges. The number of guns seized by Toronto police are surging. Check out the latest data released by the service. In 2018, there were over 1,400 rifles, shotguns, pistols, and revolvers seized by Toronto police. Last year, that number jumped to more than 4,100. After the break, a local company makes a big donation to Daily Bread Food Bank. We'll show you more coming up. Plus,
some localized lake effect and that cold air in place. I'm meteorologist Colette Kennedy. I'll tell you when it's going to warm up. The end is in sight.
Welcome back. A local company has made a big donation to the Daily Bread Food Bank.
As an industry, there's been a call to arms to give back to Canadians who are less fortunate than us through this pandemic.
JD Smith, in partnership with the Ontario Trucking Association, has donated more than 100,000 pounds of food and product to the food bank. This was their third day delivering to Daily Bread, donating 4 truckloads of products such as pasta and cleaning supplies. Their goal is to try and remind everyone about the importance of giving, especially this year. And so far, you've helped to raise more than $875,000 for GTA food banks. That's wonderful news because with the pandemic, the need is even greater this year. You can find out how to donate at cbc.ca/SOTS. Let's bring in our meteorologist Colette Kennedy now. And Colette, Sansa season runs until the end of the month, so still a couple of weeks to go, but already so much money raised, which is just so wonderful to see.
It really is, Kelda. In a year with such uncertainty and such loss, it's really great to see. Very heartwarming. So really happy to see that. I want to show you something that maybe you'll be happy about, which is that we're finally going to see things kind of winding down. The lake effect, yes, we'll have that through the night. Highly localized, though, in terms of where we're seeing the areas with the whiteout conditions. But I've got it here at 7 a.m. because I do want you to know you're still going to have some concerns on the west end of Lake Ontario for the morning commute. But what will be nice, now the skies are going to be kind of variable through the day, but we'll start to see those clouds eroding as we get into the afternoon hours especially. It's not going to be the same for everyone around the region. Further to the north of the 407, you have clearing much earlier. It's going to be a little more stubborn, though, around the west end of the lake and over towards the Niagara region as well. Looking ahead towards Friday, more of us get to benefit from a day of sunshine. So that's looking pleasant. And not only that, the temperatures will start to come up as we get towards the end of the week, but especially for the weekend where highs are going to be above freezing once again. And this very cold pocket of air will finally move on for a little bit anyway. Those winds too, causing the wind chills, well, still strong tonight into the beginning part of the day tomorrow, and then they'll really be backing off and not even as gusty tomorrow morning. So we'll see those easing. That also helps with just how cold it feels, and of course with the lake effect turning that machine off there. Overnight tonight for southwestern Ontario, look at your temperatures. -2 Windsor, keeping in mind it feels like -8. -2 for Leamington as well, and London a little bit colder there at -4 with still some flurries around the area. And we keep this tomorrow, especially in the early part of the day, but even into the afternoon there's that chance. I think you'll just see more of the cloud deck around Sarnia across towards London, so it does sink a little further south there. This is what we're looking at overnight tonight. Still some flurries tagging through the city. Less of a chance of that the further north that you go. These wind chills, though, -13 to -18. We had some milder temperatures because of that wind coming off the lake at times that we've seen over towards Burlington especially, but really we're going to be seeing those temperatures still running, you know, close to seasonal, but definitely chilly when you factor in those winds. Winds tomorrow, northeast still 20 to 30 kilometers an hour, and these are your daytime highs. We may even climb a little milder, might get to -3 for the downtown core closer to the lake, but in general, we're looking at the temperature sticking with -4. Friday, this is what I mean with the sun and the temperature starting to rebound, so -1, and even the overnight lows start to come up. Another system coming towards the weekend. It does look like it's going to hold off till later on Saturday, so now I'm just putting the cloud cover in there, bringing some showers or a little bit of a mix at times in for Sunday, and that lingers into Monday as well, Kelda.
Glad to see the temperatures go back up. Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
The Raptors are off to a good start, beating the Charlotte Hornets in both of their preseason games.
Preseason, trying to find, kind of like a good rhythm and just get into the flow of everything again.
The Raptors tweeting out this transformation of their temporary stadium in Tampa, turning the hockey arena into their home away from home. The Raptors will host Miami in their last preseason game on Friday. Finally tonight, a Canadian astronaut will fly around the moon in less than 3 years if all goes according to plan.
Canada will join the U.S. on the first crewed mission to the moon since the Apollo missions.
The federal government unveiled the new Gateway Treaty with the U.S. that lays out Canada's role in the next step in space exploration. It involves the Artemis II mission to conduct a manned flyby of the moon in 2023 with a Canadian astronaut on board. Canada will be part of the American-led effort to build a new space station that would orbit the moon called the Lunar Gateway. This country will also build a new robotic arm. And that's our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.